The boy and girl share a room, eat the same bowl of noodles, and sleep in the same bed. But they are neither lovers nor legally married couples. The boy has never even touched the girl for a moment. This balance of extreme intimacy and extreme harshness began with that utterly absurd frame in youth. After finishing his run, Kuei was spacing out on a bench, and the girl's grudges suddenly appeared in sight with her legs. She mischievously blew a puff of smoke into his face, shoved the cigarette butt into his mouth as the director approached, and the burning sensation exploded instantly with the director's slap. He gritted his teeth and endured the sound of the wooden stick hitting him, but the wicked smile of grudges that succeeded in his love and grudge took his soul away. Instead of anger in his heart, a strange excitement arose within him. This physical pain became the foreshadowing of fate. The grudge, tinged with ointment, gently soothed his wounds. He stared into her eyes and asked to live together. Kuei's world was completely out of sync at that moment. He sealed away all his joy and surprise with a cool kiss. Thus began a story even sadder than sorrow. Two lonely souls nestle in the desolate world, sharing a lifetime of silence while sharing the warmth of the black air. On the afternoon of escape, they monopolize the emptiness of the world, as orphans sharing the same suffering, filling each other's gaps. To Kuei, love is fructose's pretentiousness. His love is as cold as dry ice, and his heart burns hot. He is willing to sacrifice himself but can only choose silence, because he has inherited his father's unwise fate. Relying on bitter medicine as a play, Yu Sheng repeatedly practices how to restrain his inner confession. In the blink of an eye, the boys and girls step into the city, supporting the disguise of life. That day, Kuei pushed open the door and saw grudges crying on the sofa. He hurried forward to pick up his shattered emotions. It turned out that as a lyricist, the grudges he wrote had long been too plain. Forced by his superior in front of everyone, he overturned and rewrote it. Tears welled up in his eyes as he absent-mindedly hugged Kuei and asked, "If there is a next life, how about using it as the song's title?" Before Kuei could respond, he seemed to be asking for an empty solace. If there really is a next life, what would you most want to be? Just as Kuei was deep in thought, he pressed the recording button he had prepared long ago. Kuei gazed into his eyes, using that kind of tenderness that seemed almost future-oriented. "If there is a next life, I want to be a ring, glasses bed, or a diary. That way you will buy me away. I can change my identity and stay by your side forever, rightfully and legitimately." These passionate words instantly soothed the wrinkles in my heart, but he still seems unwilling to accept it. At the dinner table, he repeatedly probed, asking if there was a secret hidden deep in his heart that had never been opened. Kuei stubbornly guarded the truth called the terminal illness, only separated by the chasm of life and death. Over and over, softly repeating that "I like you." When grudges asked about his final wish, he avoided his miraculous gaze, simply emphasizing, "I hope you find a good man to marry." He didn't want to bind this girl who should have been a lifetime of happiness with his incomplete and countdown life. He would only quietly play their favorite songs on the radio and quietly indulge in the warm fragrance of his hair in the afternoon. In every seemingly ordinary moment of tenderness, all the unwillingness to speak is hidden. He longed to accompany her until old age, but he had already lost the ticket to the promise of the rest of his life. Rather than having a fleeting possession, he feared the rest of his life would be left only with mourning and regret. Days passed silently in these sweet hometown pretenses, until a stranger barged in. This treading on thin ice was completely shattered. One day, Yuan took advantage of a break at work to find a cup of coffee with a toast. When he opened the coffee machine cabinet, he found the washed cup had long since been emptied. He showed no sign of embarrassment. Instead, he naturally turned to the side and borrowed a cup from a stranger beside him. The lone stabbing spot struck him. He had never seen such a casual and transparent soul, and Yuangrong didn't seem to dislike this man. After learning that the man was a dentist, he actually took the initiative to visit him once. After several tentative, probing interactions, their relationship quickly heated up with the rhythm of their heartbeats. They shared their feelings about love with Kuei without reservation, while Kuei remained calm on the surface. Yet when alone, he lets the cold flowing water wash away the bitterness in his heart. "It was clearly I who pushed him into the crowd with my own hands, even though I had schemed to entrust him to someone else." But when the prophecy finally arrived, his heart still felt as if a piece had been bent by force. In the end, he could never be the one who would accompany him until old age, watching the green countdown on the washing machine. He knew his life was nearing its final moments. To find a safe haven for grudges to entrust his life to, he secretly investigated every detail of the dentist. The dentist came from a wealthy and upright family, and possessing the most precious health. Everything perfectly matched the ideal of the man in his heart. But the only crack was that the man's fingertips had long been fitted with someone else's soul dissolution. Grudges are not completely unaware. He has seen that glaring ring clearly countless times, yet it seems as if he is self-destructing, unconcerned, letting himself indulge in the illusion of long-lasting and fleeting tenderness. Every late night when he returned drunk, he would habitually crawl into Jikuei's warm bed. Jikuei's whole body stiffened, afraid to embrace or respond. He knew well that he only needed to cling to that one moment of despair. He could no longer cruelly push away this one remaining life. After he fell asleep, he gently tucked the covers in, then quietly turned and left in the darkness. One morning, he prepared a warm meal for her, but grudges rush out the door because of a date. He savors the bitterness of leftovers like bile. At that moment, Yaichi calls to cancel the date, and he immediately sets out to find the lost figure. Feeling sorry for her disappointment and mocking himself for his own help, he didn't even have the right to be angry for her. After finding her, he calmly relayed the cancellation of the date and prepared to leave. Yet the grudge grabbed her sleeve, signaling her to sit down, as if the male lead of this date had quietly changed. But his gradually withering body had reached its limit. His sudden fainting was a warning from death. He wants to rid himself of the thorns of his remaining life before he fades. He uncovers Yaichi's background on his fiancée Jenna. Her private life is a tangled mess. Jikuei takes secretly taken photos trying to exchange for her release. But in the end, he underestimated the woman's true colors. Jenna merely glanced at the photo with contempt and slapped him loudly and humiliatingly in that moment. He discovered that it wasn't just the illness that defeated him, but also the absurdity of human nature that chilled to the bone in reality. Late at night, the restaurant lights flickered, and his friend looked at Shaha, whose face was swollen and red, full of confusion. He couldn't understand why a glamorous and respectable broadcast producer could be so numb and indifferent when slapped by a woman in the midst of all the crowd. Jikuei simply gazed into the void in the distance, quietly struggling. I simply don't have time to feel ashamed, because death is grabbing his collar relentlessly closer. He admits he owns the toll, but he refuses to bid farewell to the world with cheap tears. He was even more unwilling to let those around him shed a single tear in his final waking days. He thought of the year his father passed away, and his mother left decisively and decisively. He knew better than anyone that his mother was not inherently cold. He was just the son without the family that once imprisoned him like a cage, and thus took out his anger on everything left behind in the ruins. But when he was truly left alone in place, that tsunami-like loneliness completely contradicted him. He stubbornly believed that no one in this world should live on an island. At that moment, a bus stopped in front of him, heavy with heavy breathing. Staring at the cold trees twitching on the bus, he knew well that the patience left by death had run dry. One morning, he handed Jenna a long letter filled with all his trump cards, wounded and casually wounded, along with the medical certificate that sentenced him to death. He took on the humble posture of a dying man. He pleaded with the other to grant the wish of his only lover. Perhaps this deep emotion, a self-destructive cry, moved Jenna. He agreed to this life-and-death meeting. Jenna admitted that the marriage was originally a marriage of interests. He was willing to break off the engagement and let go, but wanted to capture his withered time. Jikuei, in the midst of pain, took up this cruel contract. After the shackles were lifted, he began plotting for their happiness. He carefully arranged a group to build a manufacturing fate team. To make space, he used work as an excuse to turn away in the snow, and the heavy snow crushed his last moment of clarity. He swam backward and got up again, afraid of being seen through and broken by him. His quiet warmth only wished not to become a burden. Back home, he opened instant noodles under the cool light, never expecting that grudges would slip back in at this moment. The moment at home feels like years of married life. The marriage contract is a dream he could never fulfill even in his last life. Jenna cannot see through his humble and deep affection. He says love is like brushing one's teeth alone, knowing its warmth and coldness. These words shattered Jenna's disappointed persistence. He fulfilled the contract and broke the shackles of marriage. The freed dentist was moved by the grudge, and he presented all this joy to him. But at this moment, the grudge was dazedly brought up by this Kuei. At home, he was like a mother, meticulously weaving together every detail of my life. At work, he was like a father. He shields me from all the dark storms. When I am shattered, he is the one who is even quieter, heavier than my own brother. Sometimes he feels more like a lover whose soul resonates with mine. Hearing the words lover, the dentist's heartbeat suddenly broke out of rhythm. Driven by extreme possessiveness, he used an extremely domineering kiss, trying to carve his own mark between his lips and teeth. That night, grudges laid everything to the eye before Jikuei. In that instant, it was as if Jikuei had been drained dry. The last remaining soul could never cultivate that selfless sanctity. Unable to look at him calmly, he only loved to embrace others in the lingering warmth. He hurriedly used the excuse to clean his wounds and staggered back to the room where he relied on hiding. His fingertips were scratched with a faint red mark in the scraps. He stared at the wound, completely unaware of any pain, because the truly heart-wrenching pain never surfaced but was in the darkest corner of his chest. That heart, repeatedly gnawed at by extreme and unwillingness, was already riddled with wounds. In the days that followed, he continued to work at the same frequency, except now his figure was waiting at the exit to pick him up after work. It had quietly become that respectable dentist. Watching the two of them stand side by side, lost in a dream of bliss, Jikue could only turn away in loneliness, trying to escape this landscape filled with the sour color of lemons. From a far, freezing place, he gazes at the happiness that should belong to him. Late at night, after returning home, the music presses the start button on the tape recorder, and the piano sounds ask him, "What exactly does marriage mean to you?" Jikue lowered his eyelids, his tone so calm it bordered on cruelty. "Marriage is like a narrow toothbrush holder, there is only one rack. But in this world, there are countless toothbrushes. Two people spend their lives together. But it is the toothbrush that finally finds its exclusive grass niche and has since settled peacefully in this village of houses. In his barren world, at best he was just one among many toothbrushes. He gave him the most intimate healing mask removal, the gentlest face wash and support, but his heart was clearer than anyone's. That ticket to enter the shelf, he'd never truly hold it in his hand in his whole life. Would rather listen. Felt like fate had struck him instinctively. Ning Nan. So, could it be that we were actually married long ago? But Jikue forcibly extinguished that little bit of fire in his heart, coldly telling him that only a wedding where the vows were exchanged in front of a priest counts as a true union. He used such a harsh boundary. He personally severed the last bit of hope between the two, but he never expected that the grand farewell that was already destined would come earlier and more painfully than any version he had rehearsed. A few days later, the dentist, beaming with joy, proactively arranged to meet Jikue and brought him the joyful news that they were about to marry, preferring to make the only wish she had for her fiancé. It was actually Jikue who had asked him to accompany him to pick out a wedding dress. Jikue still couldn't understand why Ningyuan had to use such a last-minute cruelty to let her witness this scene, but she still acted as usual, habitually humbling and obedient, fulfilling her humanity. Watching her only love to put on a wedding dress and walk toward a future without her, she gritted her teeth and forced a stiff smile, repeating mechanically over and over again, "How beautiful it is." The power source treats her as the groom and invites her to change into a gown. Facing her expectant and attacking gaze, she ultimately can't say the word of refusal. She quietly put on that must-wear groom's outfit, standing shoulder to shoulder with others in that small village of Fangfang. The moment the shutter pressed, they had a wedding photo that belonged only to each other. But the moment the dress was taken off, the new house where she had lived for years finally collapsed in an instant. The tears of the strong man for so long still rushed out like deserters. No one in this world loves the girl before her more than she does. At this moment, she wishes she could sell her soul to the devil, let time freeze forever in this instant, and grow old together in the name of husband and wife. But after waking from the dream, loneliness filled her with reminding her that this was nothing but a fantasy of stolen love. Every tick of the hands on the dial coldly and mercilessly declared that her days in this world were numbered. Back home, when she saw Yuan and naturally picked up her phone to make a call, her stretched strings snapped completely. For the first time, she lost her temper at Yuan. After all, she told her to do whatever she wanted. She feared that before their relationship was completely separated, death would knock on the door first. She had to use anger as armor to cover the deep feelings in her heart about to burst. She then found Jenna and exchanged a photo recording the chapter of her life in exchange for a sad promise that for the next 3 years, every birthday would be a grudge. Please send a bouquet of flowers in her name, just to fabricate a lie that she is still alive. Jenna looked at the man before her, who looked like a withered sap, and felt she shouldn't have died so alone. Little did she know, Jikue longed to live more than anyone, to be able to tear grudges apart year after year. But a clear-headed person has no right to dream. She could only shatter the future with her own hands. That night, the room was filled with all the usual laughter and play, with only the phone screen flickering faintly in the dim background. Jikue kept typing, "I love you," over and over in the chat window. But in the end, with trembling fingertips, she silently deleted each word. This overwhelming love, which she dared not speak aloud, became the deepest and most desperate secret of her life. On the wedding day, in the name of her brother, she held hands of grudges and walked down that sacred red carpet. This should have been a romantic and fulfilling testimony to her life, but her eyes were filled with a sorrow with nowhere to rest. After reluctantly entrusting the hands of grudges to love, she personally bid farewell to the beloved Qingjing had guarded all her life, then turned away alone like a burning-out fire. In a corner where no one sees, tears finally burst. Her passionate life has withdrawn from the rest of her life with the tears. Jenna keeps her promise to buy flowers every year. She does not bring this love to grudges. Instead, he gently placed it in front of Jikue's portrait. Because the grudge that should have been spoken had already passed away 3 years ago, time rewound with the heavy chime. A previously unknown past gradually reveals her cruelest side. It turns out all these unexpected encounters are a girl's most affectionate scheme. An extremely ordinary morning, creating all night, the grudge of creating through the night, in order to capture that sliver of inspiration, habitually opened Jikuei's wardrobe. She had wanted to find a few vitamin pills that Jikuei often took for her body, but after taking them, she instantly fell into the abyss of the whirlwind. The doctor's conclusion was like a bolt from the blue. It was a special medicine used by late-stage cancer patients to suppress severe pain. In a daze, the grudges seemed to fall into a boundless, desolate place. Amid the snowflakes scattered like scraps of paper, she saw her stubborn parents and sister waving goodbye and walking away. On the back seat of that timeless train, sitting was none other than Jikuei. She chased and shouted through life and death trials, but that figure was ultimately completely swallowed by the thick darkness. In fact, their story had been foreshadowed 10 years ago. At that time, the grudge had just endured the pain of losing a loved one. In a quiet fast food restaurant, she ran into the boy who seemed to be playing with stones and helped him. Even though his mother had been missing for 3 hours, she remained frozen in place, staring in that desperate direction, crying non-stop. At that moment, Ren felt this boy looked even sadder than himself, needing a hug to survive even more than she herself. So that rough encounter on the playground that day, even that shocking cohabitation request, was never a fateful accident, but rather her warmth to get close to him, and the deeply emotional lies woven throughout her life. She thought she had finally found a piece of her desolate life, where her parents could share the years with their beloved before her. But the cruel fate befell her. But at that moment, he once again bared his chilling fangs at her. It wasn't until in the cold consultation room that she softly heard her death warrant and finally believed it. The man she saw as her lifelong home could no longer be kept. So that day, she cried her soul shattered on the sofa. Not because the lyrics had been drained by her boss Liling, but because she loved that future she was destined to never reach. She had long seen through all of Ziku's lies, yet she chose to respect her humble concealment. She used the clumsiest feigning to act dumb and fully cooperate with her grand performance called fulfillment. She repeatedly cried out in despair, hinting, "As long as you speak, I can put on my wedding dress and run to you at any moment." But Jikuei, with red eyes, told her to marry a healthy and kind man. To fulfill her final wish, she chose the man everyone admired as an unparalleled good man, a dentist she had never met. She had no choice but to approach her and personally put on the mask of betrayal. She steals souls to please a stranger. Every late night when she comes home, only after Jikuei covers her with the blanket and closes the door does she curl up in the darkness filled with the draft. Listening to her gentle voice on the tape recorder, she let the long-held tears suddenly slip away. And on the night of the party, when she saw Chiyo-Q collapse in the snow, she almost instinctively wanted to rush forward and help him up, but she could only pinch her heart with her nails to restrain herself. She quietly followed that broken figure like a ghost, betting against fate. If she turned back, she would expose all the lies. But Jikuei never looked back at her. After returning home and facing her lies, she could only shout in her heart, "As long as you speak, I will accompany you to death." But in the end, they just silently ate noodles in the silence. To fulfill her final wish, she agreed to marry Antya. The white curtain of the bridal shop separated the two broken souls. Outside, she was crying for her. Inside, she was touching a group photo, tears streaming down her face. She once wanted to confess the truth, but her tears turned to ash. On the red carpet, her gaze never left Jikuei. In her heart, this wedding belonged only to the two of them. Before exchanging rings, her hands trembled uncontrollably, because letting go meant she was unqualified to hold her hand. Jikuei would never know. At the moment she resolutely turned and left, the bride behind her had already cried until her vision blurred. It was not the joy of starting a new life, but a swan song of love never to meet again. After Jigyu left, Eun-won did not survive alone. She chose to follow him, taking all secrets and sorrow with her. Antya stared at the photo Eun-won left and the tape recorder, lost in thought for a long time. In fact, from the moment she quit the cup, she saw through this gentle yet bittersweet deception. She knew Eun-won was sleeping deep inside, and she understood that her approach was only to fulfill a last wish. Yet, in repeated sober despair, she resolutely fell in love with this desperate girl. Perhaps this was fate's wish, not her personal choice. She took the tape recorder filled with deep affection and the only wedding photo, gently placed before Nguyen's memorial tablet. All the restraint and concealment in the world, all the fulfillment and pursuit, finally settled at this moment. They stayed together in heaven with their souls. Though not destined for the mortal world, fame cannot be stopped. Yet we remain together in eternity. The story of the film is even more sorrowful than sorrow, with a source from director Taiyuan. Starring John Hyang and Lee Bo-young, this classic 2009 romance film features a song that rises in the darkness, leaving the audience with far more than just a tear. The most extreme tragic core of this film is not the eternal farewell between heaven and man, but a silent extreme of mutual pursuit yet misalignment, with Jikuei's stubborn love pushing aside the highest limit. She tried to use the lingering warmth of her own life to pave a bright and smooth path for her lover. Without her, she trapped herself in the prison of the guardian of sorrow, wearing the old armor of indifference. But inner strength has long been reduced to ashes by love and pain, while Ren Yuyen, seemingly a victim kept in the dark, has deeply participated in this collective effort called fulfillment, with even greater determination. She saw through all the other person's clumsy lies, yet chose to use the rest of her life to fulfill her own acting. If she played the act of not loving, she would act the act of betrayal. She invented a happy dream, and without hesitation, she stepped into that lonely script. This is a deeper understanding than sadness. Since I cannot heal your pain, then I'll stay with you, paining to the bone, accompanying you through this final absurd performance. The film's theme transforms from personal emotional pain to a sharp interrogation of the essence of love. Is love selfish possession or selfless letting go? Is it sincere honesty or kind concealment? Is it the rest of your life relying on each other, or helping you grow into a distant place? Zhikue and Renyuan gave an almost obsessive answer. Love is an inseparable part of your destiny, even at the cost of self-destruction. Their love is yours, like hired men walking side by side in the polar night, each holding a torch to keep one warm for the other, yet each deceiving themselves into thinking the other was in the light, so they gritted their teeth, silently burning away the last bit of life in the wind and snow. This extreme risk almost twists the sweet shell of love, revealing a martyrdom almost a faith within the inner union. It may not be healthy or worth emulating, but with absolute purity, it shakes our perception of worldly love. What this film ultimately leaves us is far more than just heart-wrenching emotion. There is also a heavy reflection on the impermanence of life. We are always waiting for a so-called miracle to speak, always thinking there is plenty of time ahead, yet forgetting that life itself is a sudden collapse. Some farewells have never been prophesied. Life is short, love must be timely. There's no need to imitate them, like silver figures hiding flowers. There's no need to sacrifice to honor so-called happiness. Cherish those warm hands in the present moment. Bravely say that passionate confession from the heart. That is the best tenderness for yourself and your loved one. Alright, that's all for today's movie. Feel free to like, comment, and share. Thank you all.